Is Satan the anointed cherub of Ezekiel 28:11-19? Because of verse 14, they think this has to speak of Satan before his fall. You were the anointed cherub that covers, and I set you there. You're upon the holy mount of God. You walked up and down in the midst of the stones of fire. You were perfect in your ways from the day that you were created, until iniquity was found in you. By the multitude of your merchandise, you were filled with violence in your midst, and you sinned. Therefore, I have cast you as profane out of the mountain of God. Now, I have destroyed you, O covering cherub, from the midst of the stones of fire. Your heart was lifted up because of your beauty. You have corrupted your wisdom by reason of your brightness. I cast you to the ground. I lay you before the kings, that they may see you. You have defiled your sanctuaries by the multitude of your iniquities, by the iniquity of your trade. So he was trading. Therefore, I brought fire out from your midst. In other words, because of your sin, it has now consumed you. And I've turned you to ashes upon the earth. And the sight of all those who see you, all those who know you among the people are astonished at you. You are a terror, and you shall cease to be forever. Okay, now let me ask some questions for folks. You've been taught that this is talking about Satan as the anointed cherub, and the reason why he fell from favor and was punished by God, right? Okay, let me just ask some questions. If this is speaking of Satan, how do you turn Satan into ashes? How do you turn a spirit being into ashes? You're saying this is Satan, but it says that this king will be turned into ashes. Satan's spirit body isn't physical for it to be turned into ashes. What are you guys talking about? Let's think more deeply. I'm not saying angels don't have material forms of some kind. Angels have spiritual shapes, but their shapes, their quote-unquote bodies, are different. It's not made of the substance of the earth. That's why Jesus Christ said in Luke 24:39, a spirit does not have flesh and bone as you see me have. Angelic creatures are spirits, so they don't have physical bodies, flesh and bone bodies. They do have shapes and forms of some kind, but it's not physical, fleshly, right? My second question for you to ponder on. Who was Satan trading with? Does Satan actually trade? You have to read that into the text, that it's trading and bartering for human souls. The plain reading of the text says nothing remotely to suggest that it's not about trading and bartering for human souls, right? In other words, you have to assume it's speaking of Satan to read that into the text, right? You have to assume it's Satan, then you have to read these things into the text. But if you just read it and no one told you it's Satan, would you walk away with the impression that's Satan? Now, the confusing part is Ezekiel 28:14, right? Because it says, you are anointed cherub that covers. So it's got to be a spirit creature. Well, we're going to examine whether that's the case. But first, here's where I'm going to challenge that assumption. Ezekiel 28 in the Greek version. The Hebrew version of Ezekiel 28 is later than the Greek version. In the Hebrew Old Testament, in Ezekiel 28:14-16, the king is said to be the cherub, right? He is a cherub, right? What about the Greek version, folks? Here it is in the Greek. Here's the shock. From the day that thou was created, thou was with the cherub. Bam! The Greek version says he was with the cherub. He's not a cherub. Now let me read to you verse 16 in the Greek and really scratch your heads. Therefore, thou hast been cast down, wounded from the mount of God, and the cherub has brought thee out of the midst of the stones of fire. Wow! The Greek version of 16 says, the cherub threw you out. You're not a cherub, but you were thrown out by the cherub that you were with. So is this Adam? Bam! Exactly. The Greek version is saying that the king of Tyre was like Adam, who in the day that Adam was created was perfect, but because of pride, sinned, and then was cast out of the Garden of Eden by the cherub. It's not that he's Adam, but he's being likened to Adam, who, like Adam, is a ruler, and like Adam, in his arrogance, wants to be like God, and like Adam, because of that sin, was punished and banished from God's presence. So he is not a cherub that was in the garden, but he's being likened to Adam, who was with the cherub in the garden, and then was cast out because of similar sin, the sin of thinking he was a God who could be like God. Because if you go back to Genesis 3, what was the sin of Adam and Eve? To be like God, independent from God, being their own God, doing their own thing. That's Genesis 3:5-22, right? So the Greek version, you don't have the king being a cherub. The Greek version, the king is likened to Adam, who also fell because of the similar sin. Okay, now, but folks, let me bring out the implication of that. If you go with the Greek version of Ezekiel, that king is not the devil. You would have to argue that he's actually Adam reincarnated, or at least the spirit of Adam possessed his body. Now, which one of you would argue that way? Now, obviously, he's not literally Adam, and obviously, he wasn't literally in the Garden of Eden, right? So it is not meant to be taken literally. You are not literally in the garden, but I am likening you to Adam in the garden, who was perfect in all his ways and was a king and was lavished with extreme beauty, but in his pride corrupted himself and sinned and fell from favor like you. So what was the common link between Adam and him? Both of them wanted to be like God. Now, what if we go with the Masoretic textual tradition? What if we go with the view that he is called the anointed cherub? Let's accept the Hebrew Masoretic textual tradition as accurate. After all, that's the reading found in our English translations, the chief of which is the King James, which over 300 years was the chief Bible for English-speaking Christians. Would that prove that he's the devil? If we went with the reading, anointed cherub, would that prove he's the devil? No, it wouldn't. What we're going to do now, we're going to read the first 10 verses, Ezekiel 28, verses 1 to 10. I'll read the modern English version, all right? Pay attention. The word of Yahovah came again to me, saying, Son of man, say to the leader of Tyre, thus says Adonai Yahovah. Watch the language, folks. Because your heart is lifted up, and you have said, I am a God. I sit in the seat of gods. Notice, he is a human being, a human ruler who says, I'm a God. I sit in the seat of gods in the midst of the seas. Yet you are a man and not God, though you set your heart as the heart of God. Now here's the key, folks. Verse 3. You are wiser than Daniel. There is no secret that is a match for you. Okay, folks. Here Ezekiel is referring to his contemporary Daniel. Be blown away with this. Daniel's reputation is such that God mentions Daniel to Ezekiel, two contemporaries. Ezekiel, by inspiration, is confirming his colleague Daniel in the court as a prophet of God. But can I ask you a question, folks? Do you think God literally meant this wicked, evil, pagan human ruler was wiser and smarter than his prophet Daniel? Than his servant Daniel was filled with the Holy Spirit? God says to this wicked, evil human ruler, you are wiser than Daniel. There is no secret that is a match for you. Really? God meant that? So wait. God is saying to the king, you're much wiser than my servant Daniel, a holy servant of mine filled with my spirit, and you're omniscient because there's no secret hidden from you. Really? He meant that literally? Okay, now folks, why did I have you read verse 3? If verse 3 is obvious mockery, he's making fun of him, then why do you believe that God is being serious with the king when he says you're an anointed cherub in the Garden of Eden? Why would you take that serious and not see it for what it is, mocking him? Did you catch it? If verse 3 you won't take as being serious, God is mocking him. You're wiser than Daniel. That's how great you are. Oh, you're a God? You're wiser than Daniel. No secret can be hidden. You're omniscient. Man, who doesn't know that about you? This is the problem when reading a text. You cannot decipher the mood of the speaker. Is he mocking? Is he being sarcastic? Is he being serious? So you have to read carefully and prayerfully. So folks, do any of you take verse 3 seriously? God really meant it? Or do you see it for sarcasm? That he's mocking him. You fool. You arrogant human maggot. You think you're God? Surely then you're smarter and better than Daniel and omniscient. No, you're not. You're nothing but a maggot, and I'm going to kill you dead. Oh, you're a God? Surely you're a spirit creature, an amazing spirit creature. You're anointed cherub. You were there in the garden. You're amazing to look at. And then pride was found in you. Oh, I'm going to kill you dead. You see the problem with taking the language of Ezekiel 28 literally? Even when he likened to Adam, that too wasn't literal. It was a form of mockery because Adam was perfect when he was created, not the king. Adam was in the garden, not the king. You see how hard it is to make a case this is Satan? So now, but what if someone says, okay, now hold on. All right, I get it. Let's assume it is referring to Satan within him. Then you can't use Isaiah 14 anymore about Satan. If Ezekiel 28 is about Satan, then Isaiah 14 is not. And I've already demonstrated it's not. But you can't have your cake and eat it too. You can't have both of them. You know why? Because in Isaiah, that being is thrown down from heaven to the earth because he ascended to heaven. But in Ezekiel 28, that being is on earth and his sin is in the garden when he's expelled. He doesn't go to heaven. So how do I take Ezekiel 28? Here's how I take it. Now, let me repeat, because people come and say you're wrong and they want to change my mind. Don't waste my time. If you want to believe it's about Satan, that's fine. You're entitled to it. That doesn't mean it's a false view. It's a damnable view. Okay, but now let me tell you my take on Ezekiel 28. It's not literal. It is mockery. God is mocking the king of Tyre, mocking him, describing him as if he was an anointed cherub, as if he was in the Garden of Eden, as if he was perfect. But even if you want to say it's Satan, I think you can make an inference that Satan may have been a cherub, but it's not explicit. Follow with me. It's not explicit. Here's the thing, though. Here's another thing I want you to think about, ponder on, and reflect. Write down Isaiah chapter 6, write down Ezekiel chapter 10, and then read Revelation chapters 4 and 5. Read those chapters. Why? Because the seraphim of Isaiah 6, the cherubim of Ezekiel 10, are described by John in Revelation as the four living creatures. John says the seraphim of Isaiah 6 and the cherubim of Ezekiel 10 are one and the same group of creatures, class of spirit creatures. They are the four living creatures. You with me there? So the seraphim, that's another name for the cherubim. The seraphim are the cherubim are the seraphim, and they're the four living creatures encircling the throne in Revelation 4 and 5. Why is that important? It's important because in Revelation chapter 4 and 5, if you read it carefully, there are three groups of spirit creatures in heaven. Three groups of spirit creatures. The 24 elders on 24 thrones, the four living creatures, and the angels. So in Revelation 5, the four living creatures are not angelic creatures. They're different. So if Satan is a cherub / seraph, then he is not one of those angels. He's a different kind of spirit creature, even different from Michael and Gabriel, because Michael and Gabriel are not cherubim, are not seraphim, they're angels. So if Satan is a cherub, Ezekiel 28 is not the text you point to show that he was a cherub. Someone mentioned it. The seraphim, the word saraf, also refers to serpents. And in Numbers 11, we are told fiery serpents bit the Israelites, and in Hebrew they're called ha-nachashim, ha-sarafim. The word nachash, serpent, is used of Satan in Genesis 3, but I'll unpack that in the future if the Lord Jesus wills.